speaking of people having interesting weeks.
Yes, and speaking of criminal frauds, George Santos is going to be facing arraignment this week. He's been indicted.
That's what it looks like. They filed criminal charges against George Santos, obviously the New York representative, just yesterday. Ryan, you mentioned earlier we can play George Santos bingo here because the allegations against him are so various.
Right.
So it's very hard to predict exactly what these charges are. What's your best thought?
I mean, the easiest ones would be filing false paperwork in order to run for Congress. You know, there's that you can creatively produce a crime out of that without much difficulty because you are lying to the public, and you're doing so in paperwork that you're attesting is accurate. Now, it doesn't mean you can't make a mistake here and there about the tenure you spent somewhere, but he just completely fabricated his entire background, start to finish. Yes. So there's that. There's also campaign finance stuff. Like it does appear that he was using donor money to finance his lifestyle.
Right.
There are basically two things that you can get busted for in the campaign finance world left. Like, there are no laws. And we can talk about Ron DeSantis just moving $80 million out of his state account into a federal super PAC and being like, this is gonna be fine. Nobody prosecutes anything, which he's right. The only things they do prosecute are straw donations, which is when and SBF appears to have done that. Sean McElwee is getting charged with or has been accused of doing that.
Dinesh D'Souza.
Basically, you get your son or your daughter to max out
right.
to a candidate, and then you reimburse them. Can't do that. They do prosecute it. The other thing is if you steal campaign funds
right.
and you use the campaign funds for personal use. There's plenty of evidence that he was living, in a place that was rented by the campaign. And then the other question is, where'd all this money come from?
The $3 million.
Lord, where did this money come from?
That's what he says. He counted $3 million in income for 1 year, right?
There's that.
And nobody really knows where that money came from.
Where'd that money come from? And Victor Vexelberg's name gets thrown around here through this Intriata guy who's like
a Dr. Seuss thing.
Yes. Oh, yes. There's all sorts of weird kind of Russian connections that might surface that could be fascinating. Huh. Doesn't mean Russian government, but just could mean like corrupt Russian
oligarchical
folks in the New York area, which, believe it or not, there are some.
Ah.
Yes.
Well, the George Santos story, I think, has always been somewhat frustrating because the lack of media coverage of his candidacy is why the people in his district right now have an absolute joke of a representative. They're not seriously represented in Congress because nobody is going to take the one person who is meant to, quote, represent their interests seriously. He has zero credibility. And, a lot of that came in the shadow of just the local media totally drying up. We talked about this in the fall, that when you just have fewer watchdogs on the ground in these given areas, one local media outlet did some really good due diligence on George Santos, but it wasn't really picked up by anyone else. There weren't a lot of other people on the case. And so now you have a situation where, actually, interestingly enough, because CNN broke this story last night, they say the charges don't affect Santos' status as a member of Congress. So nothing in the Constitution says that you're barred if you are under criminal indictment or a conviction for serving. Obviously, we've seen that in different cases. Now, the 14th Amendment has prohibitions, as CNN says, for certain treasonous conduct committed after a member has taken the oath of office. But if he's convicted of a crime, he can get of 2 or more years in prison. He is instructed under the House rules to just sit out of floor votes and committee votes.
Especially if you're in jail.
Yeah,
if you're behind bars.
That would make it tough.
They
got rid of remote voting.
They got rid of proxy voting, so
there's nothing he could do. But that is an interesting kind of part of all this, is that he actually can still be in Congress, even if this ends up, obviously as a short term, and I would doubt that this all gets litigated by the time he's up for re-election, but he could technically still be in Congress.
Right, and so right now it's 222, 213, is that right? The House Republican majority. So if he is convicted, what they often do with corrupt officials is part of a plea bargain involves you resigning from office. So that was one reason that it's smart personally of him not to resign early on, because you want to be able to save that card. You'll often see that in like with Philadelphia politicians or other ones who have been like busted for some type of corruption.
Not in Philly.
New Jersey, often you see this, that in exchange for a lighter sentence, you say, I'm forfeiting my political career, basically. And so you could see that. Tom Suozzi has expressed some interest, the former member of Congress in that area, in running. You can imagine in a special election, the kind of voters there trying to vote away some of the shame and putting Tom Suozzi back in. They were not head over heels for it, but he served there for a very long time as a popular mayor. And he was who he said he was.
That's a big start.
So there's that. That brings you down to what, 221 to 214. And so then McCarthy only has 3 votes that he can lose on big issues like debt ceiling.
And Santos has held on. I mean, he just won't resign. He doesn't. I mean, he was giving reporters Chick-fil-A in the hallway of the Capitol.
He's got the charm of a con artist.
The Anna Delvey thing going for him.
Yeah, people. I think there are some people who are like, this is such an amazing story. We want to see, see.
Yes,
see
that's the problem with the con artist charm, is that once you realize it's a con, you can't unsee it. It's just gets too cheesy after a certain point, like him giving out Chick-fil-A in the Capitol. But yeah, if folks are expecting perhaps a resignation after this news, I mean, I'm not going to rule anything out. All I would say is that he has refused to do anything else so far other than stand his ground and be kind of coy about what actually happened.
And vote however McCarthy wants him to vote.
Yeah. Because I don't know if he still thinks he has a future or a chance or whatever, but it's George Santos, not the member we need, but the member perhaps we deserve.
Indeed. Yeah, and like any con artist, you just live a day at a time.
Yeah.
Like he's not a long-term thinker. And when they asked him, how did you think that you would get away with this in 2020? He said, well, I got away with it last time.
Yes.
So.
Again, checks out.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Soccer and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.